Hello everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we are back again. And we're going to change track now and start a series of reviews of classic anime from the 80s and 90s. Just to give some quick context, I'm someone who's always loved anime. I've originally grew up on obviously the Marvel animations and the more, if you like, Saturday morning animation shows of the early 80s. But when I originally came across anime shows, they were originally screened on the UK on Channel 4 and they were always in subtitle fashion, and they were screened on about 12:30, 1 o'clock in the mornings. And this was kind of when the kind of anime manga was really breaking out into the more Western kind of countries, and we were seeing more English dubbed versions of the original animations being released here in VHS on the UK. And of course, it was the likes of Akira. That was the kind of groundbreaking anime that first came out into the mainstream cinema. But when they were screening it more in the UK, the original ones I watched first were the likes of Akira and also Cyber City Away the Way and Devilman in particular, and Three Times Three Eyes. And those were kind of the first introductions that were made to me in terms of anime. And what I loved about it most was the kind of animation and the storytelling and the production were all on a more mature level and a higher production level that what I've normally been accustomed to in terms of the early animations from the early 80s shows in particular. And it was just a more of a revelation as such, just to see such a bold kind of concept in terms of the story and the characterization. And yes, there was a lot more foul language, a lot more nudity and sex and graphic violence, but there was still, if you like, an intent to tell a great story, an intent to tell great narrative arcs with hugely complex themes and hugely complex characters. And of course, that would be in contrast with other anime where you would have such stylized action and fight sequences and kind of special effects, and the way the action was staged and the violence really had a kind of strong intent and purpose to it, along with the storylines. You know, we do associate a lot of anime of being just very gratuitous and over the top fight sequences, over the top sex sequences, which some anime does do and some manga does as well. But the old school anime that I was introduced never really had that. It was much more in line with the story, with the concept, with the plot, with the characters. And I think you can always be more accepting of that if the story and what the film is trying to do matters. And I just loved anime all the way through, and it heightened my interest even more when I came across the Street Fighter 2 animated movie released in 1994. That was just incredible. That was just, I was just amazed at how well they managed to take an established kind of computer game property like Street Fighter and make it into this fully fledged animated movie. And again, a lot of the strengths of the animes is that even in the animations, they feel cinematic. They feel like you're actually watching a movie, right? Because of the intelligence of the storytelling and the plot direction and the action and the way it's staged. It just really felt more like you're watching an actual film as opposed to the animation. And that's the best kind of achievement an animation can make, right? And it's not just anime. You have things like Lion King and Watership Down and Iron Giant and Animal Farm, things like this, where it really the subject matter and the way the subject matter is told, it gives you that real sense that you are watching a movie. If we go back to the Street Fighter, the way the Street Fighter was used against the Street Fighter movie, it's just not even compared to how much more intelligent and how much exciting the anime version was compared to the cinematic version was, right? So that's really just a brief, take on why I love anime so much. And it really got me more into drawing, even more so when I'm watching, if you like, this kind of Marvel and DC characters from the early 80s and 90s. This really, just the way the action flows and the different angles and the different shots and the more diverse styles and drawing techniques and animation techniques, it just really kind of got me into more, the anime and the manga productions on here. So that's really just a quick context of what I'm going to start off with doing these series reviews. Now, the first kind of movie I'm going to start on these reviews is Devilman The Birth. Now, this was based on a classic manga series created by Go Nagai back in 1972. And the concept of Devilman is that we have this beginning era of the earth that's ruled by angels and demons, and you have this endless ongoing conflict between the two kind of groups together. And what happens is that eventually the demons are kind of suppressed and they're forced to hibernate into these icy backgrounds, and they're kept there for centuries and centuries. Okay, and we move forward to the present day, where now the demons are starting to signal more of an emergence into the present day world. Okay, and we focus more particularly on the main character of the series called Akira Fudo, who's this young student, and he's a very shy, inhibited personality. He's very honourable and virtuous, but he's not very confident in his own abilities. And we see him at the beginning where we know that he's lost his parents to an accident, and he's orphaned, and he has these carers, and in particular the daughter of those carers called Miki. We see them together in these early scenes, and she's very much mindful and careful of Akira, but wants him to be more assertive in his own personality. And we see over the beginning of the film that Akira is bullied on and he's picked on, and Miki comes to protect him, and that's really an introduction to how the character is going forward. The story propels even more when he encounters his best mate Ryo Ishida, and this is when the story really picks up, because as we see a connection between Ryo and Akira, we learn more about Ryo's backstory and the fact that his father was deeply researching the emergence of the demons and looking at ways to combat them, because he was aware that the demons were starting to re-emerge into the present day world. And we see the kind of conflict and the issues that Ryo's had in trying to help his father, cope with the fact that these demons are coming about again. And Ryu embarks on the further mission that his father had set before in trying to combat these demons. And this is when you see him initiate a plan to try and stop the demons from coming back into the present day, and Akira helps him on his quest. And that's the kind of plot synopsis on here without spoiling any too much details. And what I've always liked about Devilman The Birth is it's very atmospheric, and it builds its story in a very structured and very measured kind of way. This isn't just action and horror and thrills and scares and violence from the get-go. We have a beautiful sequence at the beginning when we see the demonic world, and we see the kind of angels and demons that I mentioned before coming into conflict, but it's more of a very poetic feel to it rather than just a full-on vivid violence that you would normally associate a lot of anime with. And that kind of really sets the scene of what I'm talking about here, that Devilman The Birth is very much a story-driven concept, right? We see many scenes of Ryu and Akira together just on own. It's very much a two-handed piece here, and how they're discussing the threat of the demons. And Ryu himself is a very fascinating character. He's initially on the side of good and he wants to prevent these demons, but there's a deeper undercurrent here. There's almost like a sinister side to him, and whether he partly is enjoying the threat of fighting the demons, whether he's reveling in the potential of kind of coming against these demons. And we see in this various sequences how he's got a lot more of an edge to him, and we find out more why that is when we learn more about the backstory of his father and what happened there. So he's a very fascinating character, and it's a nice contrast, if you like, to the more shy, more naive personality that Akira is. And this does a great job of just putting these two characters together and giving us more exposition and more character development between the two. And this is really the more mature side of anime. Like I said before, it doesn't overload you with the action and the violence. It does what many movies themselves, particularly today, don't do, in that it just gives characters, a confined space and time for us to get to know these characters and what they're about and what their motivations is, and really get us entrenched into the story by just having two characters just talking in the room. That's what very much the middle part of Devilman is. Just Ryu and Akira talking about the quest for the demons and whether they've got the strength and the ability to really carry out the fight and go through with what they need to go through to combat these threats. And Ryu, he's quoting all this historical legend, and he's quoting Shakespeare and Horatio and etc. He's really a fascinating character, and like I said, the film throughout just keep ramping up the tension. It ramps up the kind of fascination and the engrossing element of what goes on with this story. And it just, we do get sequences throughout when they're combating demons as such, but it's, again, like I said, it moves at a very surefire, more confident pace and a more confident structure, right? And as a viewer, you're more entrenched into the story, you're more engrossed by what's going on here. And like I said, that's what makes this such a, compelling story to watch. Okay, and yes, we do build up to the climax, and it is a very spectacular, blood-filled climax. Again, I'm not going to go too much into the spoilers of it, but yeah, it, what I like about it much, like I said, is just there's a constant ramping up of the high stakes, of the jeopardy, of the peril, and it does it very steadily. So you're constantly drawn into what's going on. That's what makes it such a favourite for me. And yes, when we do get the climax, it is amazing, and it's a great ending as well. Just the way it ends, it's a very much of a bold way to kind of end it. It's not really a typically happy ending that you would normally get with an animation. And again, that's another feature of anime itself, that it had enough balls, if you like, to go to places where standard animation wouldn't. And Devilman the Birth is a great example of this. We get, like I said, a much more of a darker, really macabre feel to the storytelling, and that's what makes it one of my favourites. It's not an overly long animation movie. It's only about, I think, 55, 56 minutes long. Generally, anime is normally about 80 minutes long, 90 minutes long. But again, this is just great stuff, and again, I love the music. There's a great scene 3/4 of the way through where you've got Ryu and Akira just standing in the corridor, right? And the way that the camera pans from Ryu to Akira, back to Ryu and Akira, and you've got this great kind of piano kind of score, and it's just, again, this is at the point where they come to the fatal decision that they're going to make on there. And I just love, again, the way that the score throughout the movie is, and the music throughout the movie is as well. And it's just fantastic to watch. So if I was to rate Devilman the Birth, I would probably give it a 7.4 out of 10. I just think it's very atmospheric, it's very strong in its storytelling, it's very compelling to watch. It's very engrossing and gets you really into the movie, but it doesn't have to over rely on these really over the top action sequences that you really see a lot in today's anime. I think today's anime is nowhere near as good as the ones from that classic era, the 80s and the 90s era. People will argue against me, and there are a couple of good examples out there, but in general, yeah, I think today's anime is too much focused on the visuals and the fight sequences and such, and not focused enough on the storytelling. And Devilman the Birth is a great example of anime at its finest from a storytelling aspect, where it draws you in to these characters, and it does it at such a pace where you can digest everything that's going on. There's still a vivid amount of horror and tension in this, but at the same time it doesn't overcome the story and the plot it's trying to tell. So yeah, just one of my all-time favourites animes, and a very genuine classic. And it does stick a lot to the original manga. If you read the manga, it takes a lot from that. There are a few changes here and there, and yes, it doesn't incorporate everything. We have the sequel, The Demon Bird, which I'll do in another review, and that takes a lot from it. But there are other volumes as well that it kind of ignores. But in general, this is a really strong, faithful adaptation, which a lot of anime are, to be fair, of the original source material. That's another facet to what makes it so great. But yeah, Devilman the Birth, I think, is just fantastic, compelling to watch. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it, but just in case you haven't, it's one I would highly recommend. So those are my thoughts on Devilman the Birth. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think it's a really strong anime, or do you think it's kind of not as vivid as the recent adaptation, which was The Devilman Crybaby, which was aired on Netflix, I think it was last year? I'll do a separate review for that going ahead forward. I think this is a lot better than that. I prefer the animation style of this, which is more of a truth reflection of the original source material than a Netflix adaptation. But you let me know what you think in the comments below. Did you really like this? Is it one of your favourites, or are there other favourites that you think are superior to this version? Do you like the sequel, which I will review in a separate video? Do you think the sequel is better than this or worse? But those are my thoughts for now. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please like and subscribe as I try to continue to grow this channel. And as I stated at the beginning, I'm going to continue to do these more classic reviews of these anime adaptations and movies, because I just think anime itself is fantastic. You know, it's just really, like I said, a high level of animation that if you get the storytelling and the tone right and the direction right, along with the production values, you really have something amazing. And that's really what brought me into, you know, this anime, not only from watching it but trying to draw it and adapt and kind of copy different styles and techniques within that form. So yeah, those are my thoughts for now. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Stay safe, keep at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.